Hello, my name's Rod Clarke. I'm Professor of Operations and Systems at the Faculty of Business and Law at University of Wollongong. And today we're going to talk about higher degree research supervision practices as part of a workshop being conducted at University of Wollongong. The special topic or theme for this particular workshop is supervision as communication. So we'll start off by talking about who I am. I'm a systems researcher in the Faculty of Business, and I'm remained in the Faculty of Business after a relocation of my discipline to engineering. And I stayed in the business faculty primarily because I'm interested in how people work together. And I've been involved in developing a new discipline called operations, which is really basically what's referred to as hybrid management, a sort of technically motivated management. The tools I use for understanding this discipline and also what I apply to supervision more broadly is communication theory. So I want to look at how supervision works from the perspective of communication. I've had some experience in supervision. I've completed one postdoctoral student. I've got 13 higher degree research completions, both here and overseas. And I am often brought in as a supervisor of last resort, which is sometimes referred to as an emergency supervisor or a rescue supervisor. And typically the situations I'm brought in to deal with involve situations where the project that's been worked on or the team that's been working on it, including the supervisions, has fallen apart to some extent. And so this work necessitates rebuilding the candidate sometimes, their confidence, the thesis, and often what remains of the supervision team. From my perspective, this is the most satisfying form of andragogy, or if you like, adult teaching. So the supervision that I'm referring to here is higher degree research supervision. My experience is really at PhD level with some Master of Research. But I think what we'll be talking about applies to all higher degree research candidates and projects. This talk is going to centre around the kinds of practices that occur in supervision. It's about really meaning making during supervision. So I refer to this as the semantics of supervision. I'm interested in how contexts influence supervision, and we'll talk about contexts in some depth in a moment. I'm also referring to the kind of approach that we usually get trained in, which is a kind of bureaucratic approach to supervision. It's got its own inherent risks, and I'll be talking about some of those risks later in the talk. A bureaucratic approach to supervision matches a waterfall process, and it can often lead to longer timelines for the supervision, and it adds some risks. We usually don't talk about this, but I want to in this particular workshop. I'm also interested not just in meanings that occur in supervision, but also the kinds of activities and actions that occur in supervision, if you like, a pragmatics of supervision. I'm wanting to get a different way of doing project management for HDR supervision that doesn't involve this waterfall approach. I'm going to use an approach which a lot of people in business understand and a lot of people in information systems and software engineering understand. It's referred to as Scrum. And it involves a number of fixed length sprints that enable particular parcels of work for a supervision to be completed. And we find that when we apply sprints, we end up with candidates that have more confidence. As each sprint gets done and each package of work gets done, the students become more confident in not only their own abilities to develop text and to complete chapters or parts of chapters, but also confidence amongst the team. I also am a great believer in supervision stories to codify supervision experience. This entire talk is based on a number of reflections on my own practice, and supervision stories have been developed out of those reflections. And it works out that because it is a story, there's a sort of pattern we can use. So I'm also going to show that pattern, or a series of patterns, that can be used to codify your own experiences as supervisors or your own experience as a HDR candidate. we're going to produce a set of communication patterns and a set of anti-patterns, things not to do during supervision. And I'm going to suggest that actually this is something that we should be actively doing and actively sharing. Okay, so the agenda for today includes things that we've touched on already. What is supervision? Supervisory contexts and the development of communication model to account for them. The kind of team dynamics that can happen within a supervision. Then we'll look at traditional supervision, a bureaucratic approach to it. Talk about structuring the supervision sessions. Talk about and define what a supervision pattern is and how they can be used in developing the dissertation. I then also want to look at specifically mental health issues because they can affect both the candidates and members of the HDR team, and this can have a detrimental effect to the planning and the execution of a PhD. Also, it works out that we can codify experience and supervision stories. We ought to collectively, as a faculty, share those supervision stories. I want to talk about some concluding remarks, and there'll be an open question and answer session.